Today we're going to do a cook and it's not quite going to go to plan. Welcome along to Barbecue Life, the only YouTube channel dedicated to the Aldi Kamado. My name's Tom and today we are cooking beef brisket ragu. And as I said at the beginning, it's not quite going to go to plan on how I wanted it to be, but we're going to save it and it's still going to be fantastic and amazing. So first thing we need to do is discuss about this beef brisket. So this is the other half of the point end that I did when I cooked my brisket burnt ends a few weeks ago. So we split that point end in half. Once it was cooked it halfway, I've frozen half of it, and that's what we're using for this cook. If you want to see the beginning half of the cook, then I'll leave an iCard for the brisket burnt ends up in the top corner, and I'll make sure it's the suggested video at the end of this so that you can see how we cooked at the very beginning of it, and you can also see how we cooked them burnt ends. And the first half of that video leads straight into the beginning of this. So we've got this brisket, and the plan is to make up a non-traditional beef ragu, but it is absolutely going to taste fantastic. And we're going to put this beef in there and hopefully it's all going to pull down, and we're going to have a nice pulled beef brisket ragu at the end. So first thing we need to do is get our Kamado lit. So we're going in with a couple of wax Woodies and Texas Club charcoal, and get them lit. Once they've gone out, we'll get our lid shut, top and bottom vents fully open till that ceramic starts to warm up. As soon as the ceramic's warmed up, we can dial our vents in for 150 degrees C, so that's about one finger in the bottom vent, and the top vent is about half open, and this gives me about 150 degrees C most of the time. Sometimes you just have to give it a little fiddle, a bit less, a little bit more. Completely depends on air temperature and humidity and things like that. So we've got our Kamado lit, we've dialed it into that 150. We need to go in with a cooking pan. So this is a large cast iron pan that I picked up from Kamado Kings. We're just going to pop that in the top and get a little bit of oil in there and just let that cast iron come up to temperature. And that's going to take sort of another 10 minutes because it's a heavy piece of metal to be, it sucks in all of that heat out of the Kamado, so it does take a bit of time to come up to temperature. Once the oil's starting to warm up, we can then go in with a whole red onion. So I've just diced this up really small, and we just want to get that in there and get a nice bit of colour on there. So we're keeping the lid shut, going back sort of every 3 to 4 minutes, little look, move them around, and just making sure that we've not got any hot spots in that pan. And we're keeping the onion moving around so that it's just going at slightly translucent sort of colour. And then we're going to add 3 cloves of garlic. So this is just nicely minced up, nice and small, and add that in there. It's not going to take very long for that to burn, so you need to be very quick with your next process. So after about a minute, maybe 90 seconds, once you can really start to smell that garlic infusing in with that smoke, then we need to break that fry. So we're going to add a glass of red wine. So any red wine, so long as it's a nice one, get a glass of that in there, and that just breaks that fry in and stops that garlic from going bitter by burning it. So we get that in there, and then a nice few glugs of Worcester sauce, and we just want to let that alcohol burn out of that red wine. And as I say, it's broken that fry, it's stopped that harsh heat in the bottom. Now we need to go in with our spices. So I've just got all my spices in one pot together today, and like a little spice dump. But in here we've got 3 teaspoons of oregano, 2 teaspoons of thyme, 3 beef stock cubes, about half a teaspoon of chili powder. Normally I'd use chili flakes, but we're having a real issue trying to get hold of them at the moment. We normally use about 1/4 of a teaspoon of that. So I've gone just under half a teaspoon of chili powder instead. Your salt and your pepper in there as well. So we'll just get that into the pan. We want to just mix that through that red wine, get that nice and incorporated while we're cooking out that alcohol. Now we're going to go in with 3 cans of crushed tomatoes, chopped tomatoes, whatever you want to call them. If you do get the whole plum tomatoes, then you can put them in, get a potato masher and just give them a bit of a mash just to break them down. But these are just standard chopped tomatoes going in there today. And then we want about a tablespoon, so that's a large spoon of tomato paste or tomato puree, whatever you want to call it. Get that into the bottom and then give that a nice mix through. so that everything's incorporated around. And you'll see as soon as you add them tomatoes in there, they pick up a darker colour straight away because we've got that beef stock cubes in there, but that really amplifies the flavour within this ragu. And then the last thing to add for this sauce is just 3 bay leaves. So we just scatter them in and we let it to start to come up to temperature. Once it starts to get a little bit of a bubble on there, this is when we want to add our beef brisket. So this is just nice, sort of, these are like inch cubes of beef brisket. As I say, we froze beforehand, they've been out of the freezer overnight, and we just want to get that added in, get the lid down, and come back every sort of 25 minutes and just give it a bit of a stir. And the plan is that these beef brisket cubes are just going to break down and they're going to pull throughout all of this ragu sauce and give us a beautiful pulled beef brisket ragu. So we come back after 25 minutes, we give it a nice stir through, check that beef brisket, and it is solid. It's like an old piece of leather. So I'm really surprised by this. I thought that it was going to break down a lot more, but we're just going to stick with it for the time being. Give it a stir through, make sure we've got no hot spots in that pan, and then we're going to come back again after another 25 minutes. So after that next 25 minutes we come back in, we give things a stir again, and the beef has tendered up. So we was right to just leave it for that little bit longer. It's sitting in all that steam, it's starting to pull all the juice out of that pan, and the pan's really starting to thicken up. If it's becoming too thick at this point, you can add a splash of hot water, because we're just going to keep evaporating that back out while we're tenderising this beef. So that's what I did. I added a nice splash of hot water in there, give that a stir just to loosen things up again, and just popped it back in for another 25 minutes. After that 25 minutes, so we've now had nearly an hour and a half, and we're at the point where I want to be trying to pull this beef. So as you can see, I've gone in with a couple of forks and it don't want to pull at all. There's no way this is going to pull in the slightest. So I've put it back in again for another half an hour, thinking maybe that extra half an hour is just going to let it tenderise that a little bit more and it'll be ready for pulling. So take it out again after that half an hour and it's still not going to pull whatsoever. So to rescue this cook, well, the best thing I can do is so I can make these cubes a lot smaller. Instead of having big chunks of beef, we're going to have really small chunks of beef brisket, and then maybe some of them will pull down because they're broken down a bit more. And if they don't pull down, you're only getting a small piece of beef brisket in your mouth rather than a large piece of beef brisket in your mouth. So I took them out, put them on a chopping board, chopped them up, added them back in, mixed it through, and popped it back in the barbecue again for another 20 minutes just to see where we're at. So we're nearly at it's about 2 hours now with these 25-minute increments, and then the extra 2 minutes, extra 20 minutes at the end. As I say, any point that I think it's starting to get a little bit dry, I've just added a little splash of water just to keep things moving. The last thing we want to do is let it really dry out and burn all the flavours on the bottom of this pan. You need to make sure there's a little bit of moisture in there, but you don't want it too wet. So after that 20 minutes, some of these little pieces have started to break down a bit more, some haven't, but this is the best we are going to get. So we're going to go back into the shack and we're going to give it a taste test. So I've dished just a little piece up because we've got the pasta cooking and the garlic bread cooking indoors. But let's give it a go. The brisket's lovely and tender. It's just really annoyed me that it wouldn't pull. There's hardly any substance to it. Gorgeous. That like bolognese style sauce, that's the foolproof sauce in our house. Whenever we do spaghetti bolognese or lasagna, that is the sauce we always stick to, and that's why I've shared it, because it is just, for me, it is ultimate flavour. We've changed it up, we've put that brisket in there. It didn't quite go to plan, unfortunately. Saved it though. Still beautifully tender, completely edible, just didn't pull like I wanted it to. So if you like what we're doing here at Barbecue Life, then please do subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like the video, leave me a comment, let me know what you think. Thank you very much for watching. Cheers.